Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We're brought to you today by Simple Contacts. Right now, Three Martini Lunch listeners can get $20 off your first order of contacts at simplecontacts.com/martini or enter the code Martini20 at checkout. We have good, bad, and remembering 9/11 as our three martinis today. We'll be obviously talking about that towards the close of our conversation today. Jim, let's, first of all, before we even get to the martinis, on a much lighter note, you're in a very good mood today because the New York Jets not only won their season opener, but they have built quite a bit of optimism for their fans that something very exciting could be happening, if not this season, which it still could, obviously, that perhaps in the very near future. Your new quarterback looked good, at least after his first throw. In the end, a tight game in the third quarter turned into a rout for your beloved New York Jets over the Detroit Lions. Things looked good for about three quarters for my Bears on Sunday night, but ultimately we got Aaron Rodgers again and lost 24-23. But congratulations to you.
Well, thank you. I was picking up my older son from karate. It ends a little bit before 7. I'm trying not to break any traffic laws to get home in time for the game, which has about a 7:10 kickoff. We turned on the television like 7:12, 7:13. I'm excited. Been waiting all off season. Put on the jersey already. What do you mean we're down 7-0 already? The game just started. I checked the clock. It's like 14:32 left in the first quarter. We're all ready for same old Jets. But no, it was great. Greg, it was like a highlight film. It might have been Rich Eisen or somebody had the observation. Jet fans are really not used to optimism. It's a very weird feeling. I'm just like, you keep waiting for, there's going to be some sort of terrible Ebola outbreak in the team showers or something like that. Something terrible is going to happen because it can't stay good, but we're going to try to enjoy this happy moment for now.
Wow. All right. Well, let's get to our good martini. Again, congrats to the Jets. The good martini is that Politifact actually threw a flag against Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is the California Democratic Senator, member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. She not only tried to connect Brett Kavanaugh to the Mueller investigation in a way that kind of backfired on her in a major way. She also decided to launch a number of tweets accusing Brett Kavanaugh of describing birth control as abortion-inducing drugs. Now, while some pills that are considered birth control do induce abortions, that was not the point at all of what Kavanaugh was saying. And in the tweets, Kamala Harris conveniently left out that context. So here's what Politifact has to say. Some might argue that it's a judgment call open to legal interpretation as to whether Kavanaugh uncritically used a term that riles advocates of abortion rights, but a plain reading of Kavanaugh's answer during the hearings shows that it is broadly consistent with his written opinion. One can question why he used the phrase abortion-inducing drugs rather than abortion-inducing products or abortifacients, but it's pretty clear from the context that he was quoting the views of the plaintiffs rather than offering a personal view. Harris's original tweet with the "they say" language removed was slightly mitigated by the second tweet a day later, providing the full context, but there was no acknowledgement by Harris that the original tweet was misleading. She earns 4 Pinocchios, and her fellow Democrats should drop the talking point. So, Jim, we grouse a lot about how statements that are blatantly false uttered by Democrats are sometimes twisted into somewhat true or mostly true, even when they're not. This time, it's just a flat-out false statement from Kamala Harris, and I'm sure it didn't give Politifact a lot of joy to throw that out there, but they did it. Good for them.
Yeah, that was the first thing that jumped out at me, that it wasn't a mostly false or, missing context type explanation there. I think my all-time favorites was, Mitt Romney saying during the 2012 campaign, the size of the U.S. Navy is smaller than it's been since, some date back towards World War II. And they said, mostly false, even though the numerical was correct. It didn't take into account that today's ships are more powerful than the old ships. But he didn't say anything about the power of the ships. He just simply said the number of ships in the Navy. But they decided, no, because, he was saying something that was critical of Obama, Greg, so ergo, it must be mostly false. The other thing which is kind of interesting here is the line of attack here from Senator Harris is pretty revealing. Have you ever read a judge's opinion? Usually, particularly if it's a complicated topic, goes on at great length. And it's pretty natural that at one point you'd end up either paraphrasing or restating the argument of one of the sides. This is the equivalent of saying, well, if you quote someone, you share their opinion. In some cases, that may be true. In some cases, that may not be true. I'm waiting for Kamala Harris, the former Attorney General of California's famous statement, decision that retweets are endorsements, which is basically the equivalent of this. The idea that if you repeat something, ergo, you must automatically believe the same things that they do. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But this is the kind of argument you've got. And I do think this kind of raises the question, though, Greg, what's the point of fact-checking services and journalism and stuff like that? Because we've all seen cases where, Trump will get on a riff and say something that does not check out, and they'll do it. And, of course, that doesn't, bother Trump in the slightest. We've seen lots of Democratic, I don't think Kamala Harris is going to issue a statement of apology. I don't think she's going to retract this claim. My guess is if it seems like a good applause line to her, she's just going to keep repeating it because this is, it's the sort of thing a Republican probably would think or something like that. This gets back to these scary Republicans are going to take away your birth control argument, which came out of the blue in the ABC debate back in 2012 when, Stephanopoulos asked it of Romney. I'm glad that she got called out for it. I don't think she'll be changing her rhetoric. I think she did demonstrate that she was a bit more shameless than your average Democrat. And yes, it's a high bar to clear in this hearing. And I think that probably has a lot to do with the 2020 Democratic presidential primary. But good for Politifact for coming out and saying, look, this is not accurate. This is not true. And not even giving her that little bit of a thread to hide behind.
I'm waiting for CNN to put the lower third up that says Harris accuses Kavanaugh of saying that birth control or abortion-inducing drugs, and then in parentheses putting he didn't.
He didn't. Cry on, wouldn't it?
He didn't. Yeah. Just like when Trump accused Obama of creating ISIS, and then they put the he didn't. Just to clarify there, it's great to see PolitiFact and some of these other fact-check organizations seeing clearly for once. And if any of our listeners need a little help in that department, Simple Contacts is the way to go. Simple Contacts is quite simply the most convenient way to renew your contact lens prescription and reorder your brand of contacts from anywhere in minutes. It is vision care for the 21st century. The Simple Contacts vision test is self-guided and takes less than 5 minutes. Think of how much time you save compared to making an appointment, getting to the eye doctor, taking time off, and so forth. It's designed by doctors, and licensed ophthalmologists review every test carefully to make sure your eyes look healthy and that your vision hasn't changed. This is not a replacement for your periodic full eye health exam. It's not, but it is a great option for times in between those regular eye doctor visits.
Simple Contacts has all the brands and types of lenses you're familiar with, so you never have to shop around to find your lenses at the best price. Simple Contacts has been rated 5 stars more than 4,500 times on the App Store. You can text with the support team and always get to speak with a person. There are no automated robot systems here. Now, come on, it's getting towards the end of summer, beginning of fall, and there's no shortage of reasons to have contacts on hand. Whether it's beach days, vacations, outdoor activities, or weddings, use Simple Contacts to stock up for the season. The vision test is just $20. Now compare that to an appointment, which without insurance could cost up to $200. The contact lens prices are unbeatable, standard shipping is free, and best of all, we're offering a promotion to our listeners.
That's right. Get $20 off your first order of contacts at simplecontacts.com/martini20 or enter the code martini20 at checkout. That's simplecontacts.com/martini20 or enter the promo code martini20 at checkout to get $20 off your first order of contacts. One thing that seeing clearly isn't going to help with is looking at the numbers for President Trump's approval rating in the latest batch of polls. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them here. And all of them are showing Trump's approval rating dipping a little more than 3 points in the last couple of weeks. And in the latest batch, 4 of them that came out in the last 2 days, he is north of 50% disapproval in all of them. The best for him is 51% disapprove, 47% approve for Rasmussen. But if you get down to CNN, he's 20 points in the hole, 57-37, 16 points at Quinnipiac, and 14 points down in the Gallup poll. So, Jim, regardless of what Trump had done, he had seemed to have at least his approval rating in pretty consistent territory there in the low to mid-40s, in some cases even getting north of 45%. But it's slipping. And while Trump's not on the ballot until 2020, the approval rating for the president usually has a pretty big impact on the results of the midterm elections, so this could not be coming at a worse time for the Republicans who are on the ballot this year.
Yeah, and what's kind of strange about this bit of bad news for the administration and the president is that you look at, almost all of August, almost all of July, even going back through spring, the president's approval rating and disapproval rating were basically about the same. He was pretty much always coming in 42, 44, maybe once or twice was hitting 45 in terms of approval. Disapproval always somewhere between 54 and 51. But, I'm looking at the Real Clear Politics average here. Very stable, very consistent. And yet you see a very distinct number across several polls just in the last week or two. And you could say, well, Trump had a rough week, except he's had a lot of rough weeks. We have not seen much of a significant change in the president's job approval and disapproval numbers. So you're kind of left wondering what happened in the past week that would cause an actual change. And, I'll pundit over hot air, list a couple interesting possibilities. It could be the president's actions during the passing of John McCain, the bare minimum time that the flags were at half staff at the White House, the lengthy time waiting for even just a cursory presidential statement. Maybe that rubs some people the wrong way. And let's face it, right now Trump's base support is a big chunk of self-identified Republicans. My suspicion is that anti-Trump Republicans no longer identify as Republicans and are now independents. And he's got a small chunk of the independents, and that's what's making up that 42 to 44% of the country that approves the job he's doing. Well, if you lose just even a small fraction of those, let's say the Trump actions during McCain's passing really offend people, well, maybe that'll actually have an effect. In other words, you basically don't have a lot of folks to lose, so even a small change in people who are ordinarily supportive of you could have a noticeable effect on the poll numbers. There's also another argument that says, look, okay, maybe this is some sort of cumulative effect, not just the McCain reaction, but, the Cohen and pleading guilty, Manafort convicted, the Woodward book, the anonymous New York Times op-ed. I actually don't think those are really driving the numbers that much. Maybe there's a sense that the public's the number comes from a slight dip amongst self-identified Republicans, which is kind of interesting. I wonder if, they're used to a certain level of Trump chaos. They're used to a certain amount of Trump drama and Twitter tirades and stuff like that. But something in the last, week or two has really kind of gotten under their skin and put them in a particularly unsupportive mood when the pollster calls. So, it's not like they were in great shape before. This is a sudden collapse. But look, you want to have that number as high as you can get it heading into Election Day. And for the president, this is bad news coming at a really inconvenient time.
Yeah, if you look at CNN's poll, and you can look at the methodology. I haven't done it yet, but if these numbers are anywhere close to right, Republicans are in very big trouble this year. The disapproval, or the unfavorability, I should say, for Trump last week among Democrats, 92%. That doesn't surprise us. For Republicans, dipping from 15 to 18%, or actually rising to 18%. Independents, though, is the killer. Before that, back in June, 55% of independents had an unfavorable view of the president. Now it's 65%. And if that's anywhere close to being right, we are in big trouble in a couple of months.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, look, I'm sure that there are a bunch of Republicans who are pretty happy with the results they're getting from the Trump administration, would rather that he wouldn't get into these constant self-inflicted wounds, wouldn't go on the Twitter tirades, wouldn't let his mouth get himself in trouble, wish he handled the McCain passing in a slightly more gracious manner. Mr. President, this is the time to bring your A game, all right? This is, if there's ever a time when you want to just act like a normal president and talk about the economy, talk about the booming jobs, talk about, we've seen a little bit of wage growth going on, considering the day that this is, the smashing of the Islamic State, the fact that we really haven't had any serious terror attacks on American soil while, you've got good, happy things to talk about besides fuming about Robert Mueller and the FBI. So maybe you try doing that and see what happens on Election Day. We will see how things shake out. But, the administration has a good story to tell, and the president is only intermittently committed to telling that story.
All right, Jim, let's move to our final martini now. No crazy martini today. Today is the 17th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. You and I have appropriately taken time every September 11th since we started this podcast to reflect on what we were thinking and feeling at the time, and how over the years fewer and fewer Americans actually remember it. I have interns every summer. Now we're getting to the point where almost none of them actually remember the details of that day, and if they do, they're extremely fuzzy because they were about 4 years old at the time, and it's only going to get more beyond that. People born in 2001 are going to be graduating high school this coming spring. We are moving past a point where we can assume that everyone remembers it, and which makes it only more important that we actually pause to do that. You mentioned on Twitter this morning that MSNBC, which every year had played the real-time footage, I believe, from the Today Show, they replayed that every September 11th. They didn't do that this year. And so we're moving beyond remembering the exact moments and what was going on minute by minute that morning. For this morning, we're going to play a little bit of President Bush's speech to the joint session of Congress on September 20th, 2001, where he talks about how over time things get more back to normal. Here's what he had to say towards the end of that speech.
It is my hope that in the months and years ahead, life will return almost to normal. We'll go back to our lives and routines, and that is good. Even grief recedes with time and grace. But our resolve must not pass. Each of us will remember what happened that day and to whom it happened. We'll remember the moment the news came, where we were and what we were doing. Some will remember an image of a fire or a story of rescue. Some will carry memories of a face and a voice gone forever. And I will carry this. It is the police shield of a man named George Howard, who died at the World Trade Center trying to save others. It was given to me by his mom, Arlene, as a proud memorial to her son. It is my reminder of lives that ended and a task that does not end.
Jim, I think that sums it up pretty well. And you talked about it in the Morning Jolt today, that the fact that we are back to a sense of normalcy, even if it's a new normal, is a good thing. But at the same time, we know that the threat still exists, and we need to stay on top of it. And lately, fortunately, we've been doing a pretty good job.
Greg, I was informed by someone that they did not do it last year, so it looks like MSNBC did the rebroadcast of the NBC coverage of the 9/11 attacks for the first 15 years after the attacks. And I think they deserve some credit for that. It probably was going to have to stop at some point. I think we can debate whether this was the right one, but someone else pointed out something which may be more of a factor than we like to admit. That coverage at NBC was heavily anchored by Matt Lauer, who looks very different today after the revelations about his apparently rampant, pervasive sexual harassment and or alleged sexual assault of other employees. Now, I don't think that necessarily means you erase history, but I guess I can understand a bit of their decision-making. And I don't know about you, Greg, I missed it. For all, we give NBC a lot of grief, but I thought this was one of the classier and more important things that they did over the course of the year. And I don't think any other network really did that. Everybody covers the memorial services as they probably should. And so I was pointing out that you can find online just about all the network's coverage of that morning it was archive.org. I tweeted out there. Look on my Twitter feed if you need to find it. It is good that life gets back to normal. It is good. I said one of the ways, maybe it's fair to ask whether we're winning the war on terror, in part because Americans don't spend a lot of time thinking about the war on terror. Terrorists still exist. They're probably always going to exist, but we do not live in fear. We are not terrorized. Most of the time, we go through life and we don't fear if Al-Qaeda is going to hit us. And I think you can say something about Al-Qaeda that they're not even the world's premier Islamist terror organization anymore. They've really been supplanted by ISIS. The contrast between the way the world reacted when Osama bin Laden would issue a video, it was big news. The world would more or less stop. Everybody, what did he say? Not really expecting, the next attack is going to be here and how, but just a sense of this was the enemy, and he was speaking, and it was worth paying attention to. A lot of my readers, Greg, forgot that Ayman al-Zawahiri was still alive. And I guess he's somewhere up in the mountains of Pakistan. And every now and then he issues a video. But honestly, Greg, we may have a bigger listenership than he does. Nobody cares. It's kind of the way it should be. As far as anyone can tell, you don't see this uptick in attacks or reaction after an Ayman al-Zawahiri attack. We don't hear from Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, very much. The Islamic State is not completely destroyed. There's one little enclave that they're closing in on. basically a village of about 60,000 people. But, they once controlled territory the size of Britain, and they don't anymore. So we do live without fear. I don't know if it's, we should, say that the threat is completely gone. I'm knocking on wood as I say this. You never know what tomorrow holds, but it does feel that the forces of Islamist terror have suffered a great defeat, and we can go about our lives. But I think it's a very good, particularly on the morning. I don't know about you, Greg. It feels like it means more when it lands on a Tuesday.
Yes.
It's one of those days where all of a sudden you are taken back and you remember everything you were doing that morning. And I think it's okay that we take that time. I think it's going to be something that's going to be stuck with us, and I don't know if you're going to say haunt us, but that we'll be thinking about on this day until the day we die. And I've talked about it with my sons and tried to give them a sense of it, and they kind of understand it, Greg. I get the feeling they don't get it in their guts the way we do, and I find myself thinking, Greg, God, is this the way we always sounded to baby boomers when we talked about the JFK assassination? Is this the way they always sounded to the Greatest Generation when they talked about Pearl Harbor? Is it one of those things where if you live through these world-changing events, the generation that comes after you will read it, they can understand it, but they never quite feel it the way you do? I think it's just kind of the nature of history and the passage of time, Greg.
Jim, as we commemorate this solemn day on the American calendar, we'll end there for today. Have a good afternoon, and we'll talk again tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. And tune in again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.